Micah Richards is back on the BBC for the World Cup, and it took him only minutes to bring Gary Lineker into the conversation. Live on air, during the BBC's first World Cup match of the summer, Richards dropped a cheeky reference that instantly cracked up the studio, and it came right in the middle of one of the biggest talking points around the broadcaster's tournament coverage. The BBC was not presenting from America. Gary Lineker was no longer leading the show. Gabby Logan was now fronting the coverage. And Micah Richards somehow was moving between both worlds, the BBC's UK-based studio and Lineker's new football setup in New York. So when Richards saw his chance, he took it. And the reaction told you everything. The moment came on Friday night as the BBC opened its World Cup coverage with Canada against Bosnia and Herzegovina in Toronto. Gabby Logan was joined by Rooney, Olivier Giroud, and Micah Richards. It was a new-look BBC panel for a new-look tournament, and one of the most noticeable changes was the absence of Gary Lineker. Lineker, who had been one of the BBC's most recognizable football presenters for years, left the company completely in May 2025 after a controversial social media post. For this World Cup, Gabby Logan has replaced him on BBC coverage. But Lineker is still very much part of the football conversation. He is working with Alan Shearer and Micah Richards on The Rest is Football, with the group operating from a plush Times Square studio for Netflix. That created a strange situation for Richards. On one side, he was back on the BBC sofa. On the other, he was also working with Lineker in New York. And Gabby Logan wasted no time teasing him about it. As she introduced the panel, she pointed out Rooney and Giroud's major tournament credentials. Then she turned to Richards and joked that this was his 8th World Cup watching on TV. The studio laughed. Richards smiled. But Logan was not finished. She reminded him that he had been out in New York that week and said she admired his commitment before joking that he did not actually need to acclimatize because she was bringing New York to him. That was the setup. Behind the panel, the BBC's large studio screen showed changing locations depending on the match being covered. It was a way of giving the broadcast an international feel, even though the presenting team was not actually based in the United States like ITV and other broadcasters. And that detail has already been heavily discussed. The BBC made the decision to base its presenting team in the UK, using its Salford setup rather than sending the main studio operation across the Atlantic. That decision has been questioned, including by Gary Lineker himself. But before any serious debate could take over the opening show, Micah Richards found the perfect joke. Looking across the studio, he said, "This is amazing. If you look over there, I think you can see Gary Lineker." The room exploded. It was quick, it was cheeky, and it landed because everyone knew the context. Lineker had left the BBC. Richards was working with him elsewhere. The BBC was trying to recreate the feel of being abroad from a UK studio, and Richards had just turned all of that into one perfectly timed line. Gabby Logan immediately fired back, "Same initials, different person." That response kept the joke moving and made the whole exchange feel light, playful, and sharp. But behind the laughter, there was a bigger story. The BBC's decision not to base its main presenting team in America has become one of the early talking points of the tournament. ITV and others have gone out to the host locations, while the BBC has chosen to cover matches from home. Gary Lineker has already made it clear that he does not understand that decision. He said he was very surprised the BBC was not going, arguing that the World Cup is the biggest television event over the next 5 or 6 weeks. In his view, because the tournament is likely to dominate the most watched programs of the year, it justifies having a proper presence on location. Lineker also spoke from experience. He said he had done many shows where presenters could not travel to tournaments and had to work from what he described as a green box. Even if the production makes it look like you are not at home, he said, you still are. And to him, that feels soulless. That is why Richards' joke cut through so quickly. It was not just a random name drop. It touched the exact nerve of the story. Lineker's departure, the BBC's new era, the studio setup, and the contrast with Netflix's New York base. And Richards is right in the middle of it all. He will be splitting his World Cup between Lineker's Rest is Football Manhattan podcast studio and the BBC's home-based coverage in the UK. That means he is moving between two very different versions of tournament broadcasting, one with Netflix freedom and a Times Square backdrop, the other with the BBC's polished studio operation from Salford. When Logan asked about his hectic schedule, Richards said it felt great. He also mentioned the buzz in New York and said the Knicks were doing well after so many years. But when it came to the World Cup atmosphere, he admitted that the real feeling would probably not fully arrive until America played. Still, Richards made one thing clear. He was excited to be involved. "I'm absolutely buzzing," he said, adding, "Thanks for the call-up." So in just a few minutes, the BBC's first World Cup show delivered exactly what live football television often does best: a sharp joke, a little awkward history, and a studio full of laughter. Micah Richards returned to the BBC and immediately reminded everyone that Gary Lineker may be gone from the broadcaster, but he is definitely not gone from the conversation. Gabby Logan handled the moment with a quick comeback. The panel kept the mood light, and Richards once again showed why he is one of football TV's most unpredictable personalities. But the bigger question remains: as the World Cup rolls on, will viewers embrace the BBC's UK-based coverage? Or will Lineker's criticism about being away from the tournament atmosphere continue to follow them? One thing is already clear: Micah Richards does not need long to make headlines. All he needs is a microphone, a live broadcast, and one perfectly timed Gary Lineker joke.